Hey, how's it going? You there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Nice. Do you want to angle your camera down just a touch? Yeah. Otherwise, I'll just be cutting only your face.
How's it going?
Yeah, that's going good. Some quick updates. Have you seen the Sora stuff? It's like all of these AI companies released video prompt to video platforms like in the last 3 weeks. You've got Google, Meta Vibes, which everyone hates on, which is hilarious. It's
Hmm.
like, and then Sora, which people are actually excited and weirded out about. But you have to be invited to it, but have you heard of what it is?
No, but I've been seeing a lot of
So,
the output, and it's hilarious.
okay, so basically, if if I got an invite, it would say, okay, record your face and your likeness and your voice and all of that. So that way it can insert you into different scenes, right? And then I would say, okay, well, I want Marcello to also be part of this. So I would send it over to you. You'd have to do the same.
Hmm.
But then if we open up both of our like likenesses to each other, we can actually insert one another into whatever we prompt with. So I could be like,
Oh,
I
that's
want
crazy.
to do a video of Marcello snowboarding down the Italian like hillsides, right?
Hmm.
And it would do that.
This
Or
does not
arguing with
seem like a
like,
good idea.
oh, it seems like a terrible idea, but it's like they're it's like a social network, which is very strange. They didn't release it as a tool for just generating content. It's like they released it as a tool for just basically generating content for each other as meta vibes.
Crazy.
Yeah. So big mistake.
I've been seeing
But
some of
yeah,
the content that's coming out of it, and that's really funny. The stuff that I've been seeing.
was that the one you sent me on Instagram?
I
It
can't
must
remember
have
what I
been
sent you, but
the one
man,
with
some
Michael Jackson.
yeah, yeah, they're really going
It must
hard
have
with
been
Michael
that.
Jackson content. It's so funny. The best is the series of him stealing chicken from KFC patrons. So good.
All
Well,
right. Well,
let's
we're here
jump
to
into it.
talk about something.
So we are going to focus on sourcing websites, web applications,
Yeah.
web
What do we?
ecosystem work, digital transformation. Like what, from a client perspective, what and how do you go about sourcing the right vendor? What do you need? What do you need? And it's not necessarily about picking the right vendor, more so about like how do you better scope work so that the what you get as an input back from different vendors is as accurate as possible.
Yeah. I think it's about like
That makes
how to
sense.
start your website project as a marketer or as a product company. Like, how do you just start that project? What do you need to do beforehand? Because it's not even like the choosing a vendor could be a whole different episode, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking primarily like not again, yeah, not choosing a vendor, but when you go to RF, I mean, it doesn't even have to be RFP or RFQs. It could just literally be like multiple estimates, like what information and what sort of like brief you need to put together in order to get the most accurate response back from companies like ourselves. So like what are the ideal pieces of criteria?
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, I don't think we even have enough time to go through
Yeah,
that
we could
list.
start. We could just start it. Like most of the time, companies come with a very like vague idea of what it is that they want and a very vague idea of what they're expecting as a from companies like us. And then yeah, of course, what it costs. I mean, they don't need to know what it costs, but like at least they have a basic understanding of like what is a realistic budget for this kind of work. And if all three of those things are missing, it's sort of a waste of time for everyone, to be honest. Working with an agency to scope something out, and you both might just not be the right fit for each other.
Yeah. I think it's like a bit of a quick reality check too. Like most, I would say most of these types of projects, the digital transformation, the web projects, the product projects, they can fail before any of that work is even done if things are not scoped or prepped properly. So like
Hmm.
this is the critical part of any project and scoping, writing that brief, being explicit. It's not because of the design or the development. It's often due to like poorly scoped projects, a poorly
Hmm.
written brief. There's even like there's a link I'll post in our show notes, but 70% of digital transformation projects fail to meet their goals, likely because of this. Websites often overrun on time and budget due to unclear requirements, right? So really big, it's a big spread too. You can have timeline and costs exceed 25% plus. That's why a lot of companies throw those contingency budgets in as well. It's also why we scope our projects a bit differently. But yeah, a strong brief is the cheapest way to de-risk a project and to de-risk your investment. And I know it's always a hard sell, but I've always said, like, just bring us in to scope the project. Like, that is a small fee, costs anywhere, could be like 5 to 15K, but that immediately de-risks the complexity of a project. If you're working with an RFP that could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, $5 to $15,000 spend upfront with a firm like ours to help you write that RFP is money really well spent.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking the same thing. Like we have two examples across the gamut of like very well, there's a scale of complexity. I shouldn't say there's two examples, but there's two outcomes in the scale of complexity. It's either like your project is usually maybe like potentially anything from like an enterprise size website all the way to like a product or an application will have enough complexity that it's pretty difficult to scope to like a level of detail. I guess it depends on the project really, but it is kind of hard for clients to scope that on a level of detail that a brief would be useful for a company like ours, like us. In those instances, we've even kind of like forced that like consulting service first because it's even difficult for us to scope something or spend enough time to properly scope it without actually getting paid to do the work. So, in those instances where it's really complicated, like you have user flows that are complex, you're trying to, it's high value product, it's generating revenue, like something that's really critical to the business, totally makes sense to work with an agency to actually work with you to create the blueprint, which is kind of like a core part of our process. But sometimes you need to pull that out in order to accurately define what it is that you're designing and building. So there's one fork, which is, let's call it like the more complex side, and then there's the other fork in the road, which is like a marketing website or something that's has a lot less variables. Like
Yeah.
clients could probably put together a pretty decent budget for it. I mean, brief. I am kind of like surprised uh, how rare it is to see any documentation going into quoting something like that. It's usually 2 to 3 discussions, and you're kind of like pulling stuff out of you're just like pulling institutional knowledge out of someone through a conversation. Sometimes it's like qualitative. This person doesn't like X, or that department doesn't like Y, or whatever it is. And it's very rarely ever documented, if ever. Like I can't remember the last time we've done, like a simple to mid complexity level website where there's been like great documentation for what the vision is.
I've actually never seen that. So,
Even
yeah,
like a feature list, like nothing is ever
no.
documented.
Well, I've seen feature lists, but the problem with feature lists is they don't have depth. Like listing a feature, like here's a really good example. Someone wants to include, I don't know, let's say like a member portal,
Hmm.
right? Well, what's in a member portal? First off, you got to tell us like what is a member even doing in that portal? Second of all, they'll usually list login, right? Ability to log into the member portal.
Hmm.
Okay, well, you can log in like countless different ways. There can be SSO, there can be two-factor authentication. So simply naming a feature doesn't necessarily give you the depth and the complexity of that feature or the business logic that might even go into it. So a simple login, it could be a few hours to implement. It could also be 30 hours plus additional tooling, additional security, who knows, right? And a lot of the times we don't get that detail. It's not written into the RFPs. Now, I don't know. And that's again why you should,
And that's pretty basic too. Like that's
that is
something that
basic.
should, especially for an RFP where like the RFP is sort of brief. That's something that's pretty much always missed. I've never seen that level of detail. Whole other thing, because the other frustration with RFPs is that, if it's a strict RFP process, in that example, we can't even pick up the phone and say like, hey, I want to just like understand this feature request in a little bit more detail. Like what kind of sign in or login are you thinking here? Like that's literally impossible.
Mhm.
And that's such a small, simple example of um, why personally I think RFPs are terrible and hard to estimate accurately. And then it's also competitive. So like it's just like compounds the issues. But yeah, ouch. So
I was just gonna I got a short list of things to help people along in the process as well. So
great. Yeah, it's perfect. Go for it.
one thing is to start with problems, not solutions. I see this as a huge mistake all the time is RFPs or requests for like projects. It's always starting with the solution first rather than the problem. A good example is like, okay, the website takes me weeks to upload content to my marketing website. That's a problem, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
really good problem to frame that you will want a vendor to solve. Don't start with, well, we need a new CMS, right? Because that's starting with solutions first rather than framing the problem because you
Mm-hmm.
don't know exactly what the solution is. The solution could actually be just updating the CMS, upgrading it. Sure, maybe it's a full re-platform, but specify the problems, like list all of those out as someone putting the project scope together as an initial step. Because then you're coming from a position of listing the pains rather than the solutions.
Mm-hmm.
Saying we need a new CMS, that's a solution. Well, meanwhile, the pain is our marketing team can't update content without a developer,
Mm-hmm.
right? Gives me way more information than just I need to update the CMS. Well, my head immediately goes to like, well, why? Is it the developer problem? Is it a legacy problem? Is it compliance issues? So I think that's just a really good example. And, a couple of the problems that we commonly hear are that thing like I can't update content without a developer. The CMS is outdated and aging. It's going to be deprecated, or we have to upgrade it, but it's going to cost us X amount to do that with our existing developer. The user experience feels dated, or compliance stuff. Like we talk about this all the time, the AODA, ADA, WCAG stuff. Maybe your website problems are that you're not compliant. So there's some
Mm-hmm.
risk there, right? So I'm
So
sure
what's
there's
the
like,
number one? Frame the problems. All
yeah,
of them.
frame the problems, all of them. Just do a workshop internally to frame the problems.
And what's
Yeah.
number two?
Number two is it's on the
How
heels of
many do
that
you have,
one.
by the way?
I don't know, like 4 or 5 or something.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Defining objectives and outcomes. And we do this in our workshops, but we do them in our workshops because they are so poorly defined oftentimes in the RFPs. What is that measurable change that you want? Obviously,
Yeah.
conversions are a hard thing, but it's like, do you want to reduce the time it takes to get content out from 3 weeks to hours? Maybe you can't
Mm-hmm.
ascribe exact numbers to it, but that's another thing you just have to get really clear with is your outcomes. What are
Mm-hmm.
the actual objectives?
Yeah,
And
it's nice to have all of them listed, but I would also say that from an impact perspective, a priority is typically a priority. I feel like everyone falls into this trap of priorities, which is like splitting up your focus in way too many ways. It comes to audiences too. Like, what is the priority audience, not the priority
totally.
audiences, plural?
Yeah. And what do we do differently with our audiences that is maybe a bit different from other processes?
You're prompting me. Why don't you just
That's
talk
funny.
about it?
I guess, yeah. I am the one that does the workshops, but
No,
um,
no, I know, but I just found
yeah,
it funny that you're prompting me
that's too
instead
funny.
of just diving in.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we have tiered audiences, right? Which is cool. Tiered audiences make a huge difference because it's tiered based off of your primary audience is the one that if they didn't exist, your business wouldn't exist. Who are they? Define them. And then secondary audience is adjacent to that. You could
Hmm.
do without them, but they do come to your site, your product and whatnot. But your existence isn't necessarily for them. They're just adjacent. And then the tertiary audience is an audience that's maybe built up of internal teams and departments, but also potentially optics. We do a lot of not for profit work. And sometimes those not for profits have a tertiary audience of the government,
Hmm.
where the government just needs to find information on their programs and they're not a key audience member. They just need info. So that's a really good way of spreading out the audience and prioritizing them to say there is still just one audience that we should focus on, but we're acknowledging that there are other layers to this that we
Hmm.
won't, we won't shy away from. But if you're asking us to implement a feature that's going to 10x your budget and it's specifically for your tertiary audience, our answer would probably be like, don't do it. Yeah. Yeah. I'm,
Fits.
I'm also glad you brought up just like not like over prioritizing multiple priorities because you're right. It's a big mistake. And that's another
I
thing
think
we
a lot
see
of
in
people make that mistake. I mean, we make that mistake internally all the time when we talk about priorities. Priority is singular
supposed to be
priority.
one thing.
Otherwise, you just never get anything done.
No, you don't. Like, it could be critical. You can score stuff critical, high, medium, low, but still, like, you should only have one critical. And that goes with projects that we see companies, they lump so many different projects into a single monolithic project. A good example, oftentimes, is we need to redo the website. Okay. Well, we also need to reintegrate the CRM, or we're buying a new CRM, or we don't know what CRM to use and we want to add it. But we also have this ERP that needs to be integrated and we want to integrate XYZ. It's like the list goes on and you end up taking a standard marketing website from standard brochureware up to this monolithic ecosystem where things are integrated and talking to one another. And that's
Mhm.
great, but you're like boiling the ocean by trying to group that all under one single project.
Yeah, agreed.
So yeah, that was number 2. And then this is the funnest one, but probably the most controversial and the one we discuss about most often, budgets. Setting a realistic budget early if possible.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
like
I would say like a range it is possible too. I mean, like I just feel like it doesn't need to be like maybe people feel like, especially I totally understand from some prospect perspective when they're getting into a project, digital project, and they literally have no idea. And this is part of the research is to understand the budget. You have your own internal budgets that um, you have as a marketing budget. And I know that there's also some like people just don't want to share because they feel like you're just going to quote within the budget, whatever it is, which that one doesn't really make sense to me because you just want an accurate estimate that's scoped well, priced appropriately, all that. So when it
yeah.
comes to budget, I mean, like it's helpful to even just start with what is the budget that you've been assigned, like whether that's all going to web or not, what's the range. It speeds up the process. Like the reality is like not everyone is a good fit for everyone from like an agency and prospect perspective. So figuring that out early is great. It saves everyone a lot of time. It also, I think, gets you to a faster point of education. So like understanding where your project kind of lies in the market of web and digital transformation. And then at the very minimum, like a range is helpful too.
Mhm.
I think that also people don't understand that like there are so many ways of doing things when it comes to web and design and development, and all of them impact budget significantly. Sharing your budget doesn't mean you're going to get a worse product because someone told you it should cost more or something like that. It just means that it's a different way of executing it based on the budget. So when we're asking budget and budget ranges, we're just trying to understand like what do we need to do in order to keep the same standard of quality within the myriad of ways that we could execute. And if it's not a fit because we can't, then it's not a fit. But
Yeah.
playing the guesswork is just kind of really difficult to get to like a common ground.
Mhm. I think the guesswork is part of like it's an increase of risk and it wastes everybody's time as well. Like when I was thinking about stuff around this topic for this podcast, I was thinking treat it kind of like a job posting, right? You're transparent
Yeah.
about salaries, right? And what
Well,
does
not
a
everyone
salary
is.
do, right?
I would say
Not
there's
everyone
also
is.
the
No. No.
same level
Yeah,
of discrepancy or variability in job postings as there is in the like
for sure.
vendor sourcing.
Yeah, yeah.
But but it
Pretty
is a
same.
good example.
But the best job posts are the ones that give a salary range because what it does is it helps people self qualify. So you can self qualify vendors just by putting a range. There's things that we just won't pitch on. And there's things where, the budgets might be incredibly healthy, but it's also a good sign of the complexity. So it opens up other questions. But being transparent with the budget is good for everyone because it decreases the risk, it saves everyone time and ambiguity.
Mhm.
And I wanna touch on that one myth that you mentioned about this whole like vendors will just they'll hear the budget and then go to that budget. It's a bit of a myth because for us, we have our project minimums, right? But if someone comes to us and they're below the minimums, we can still work with them to shape what that scope of work could look like.
Hmm.
A good example was that not-for-profit that came to us a bit ago, and they don't have the budget for our minimums. So I came back, I said, "Well, here's what we can do with that." Right? It's not a matter of trying to fit a $40,000 budget into a $20,000 budget. It's a matter of saying, well, this is your budget. What can we do with it that will maximize the impact? So you adjust the scope, you cut maybe low priority features and get things aligned. You still get the
Hmm.
high quality service, but that conversation would have never happened if we didn't have a budget to begin with, because we knew going in that they didn't have the minimum qualifying budget. So we were able to get really strategic with the scope of work.
And maybe that's not it's not an accurate experience for. I actually don't know from like from the client side, like what other experiences are out there with agencies, but maybe that's not an accurate or typical experience.
I wonder.
Right, next.
Yeah. All right. Next, and we kind of touched on this a bit, but it was just about language around features. Something as vague as a login system or events calendar, or one of the most problematic ones is forms. You think they're really innocuous, but forms, they get everyone into trouble because if you're working on a product or even a website, I think the expectation is that forms are going to be part of the CMS
Hmm.
and that the client will be able to construct any form that they want and connect it into their data sources. That is never the case. You should always consider a third party tool. And if you are building a custom form builder, which you shouldn't, that like 10x's the level of development. So you should really be asking yourself, what value does having a custom form builder actually deliver me? And we've had this conversation with enterprise companies before, even on the event side. They wanted custom events for transactions and payments, but just having an event calendar, you have to ask yourself, well, what are all of the different things that I have to consider for the business logic? Someone can sign up, someone can cancel, someone maybe has to pay. There's public events, private events. All of that logic, if you were to custom build it, is absurd and expensive and difficult to maintain and expensive
Hmm.
to maintain. So vague features tend to be one of the biggest traps with some of these sites, and understanding that there's often off the shelf tools that can help you, like Eventbrite would be a really solid event calendar tool. It's the build versus buy thing. And the more information you can give to a vendor that can look at it and say, well, build versus buy, I'm going to recommend the buy
Yeah.
option in this estimate, the more information and like the clearer the quote and the estimate it's going to be. So I would say like maybe do some research around potential off the shelf integrations that you might be interested in exploring, or even if you're open to them at all. And then I don't know if this is the last one. Oh, I said five or six. Yeah. Phases and timelines. This is another one for us, kind of akin to the whole like boiling of the ocean comment. Typical project phases, just understanding the reality of how long things actually take and what your level of involvement is going to be for the phases. So, from you as a marketer, understand where your commitment might be. How committed are you during the discovery process? How committed are you during the design process? All of this stuff is going to require a level of effort from your team as well.
That's a good one. How would so are you asking them to define how much they're going to be involved in each phase, or are you asking them because like how would they know how much commitment is required if it's someone that's like doing this process,
Yeah, that's
going through
true.
this process for for the first time?
Hmm.
Maybe it's more about like just understand. Well, I think in general, if someone's going into a website project and they're sourcing a vendor and they're going to start a 6 to 8 month process and they haven't thought about their own work schedule and think that they're going to be able to do this huge, pretty big, in some instances, pretty big project without changing their work schedule at all, like that's a problem, obviously. So starting to think about, how is that going to affect your priorities over the next 6 to 8 months? And I think like some of the best clients that we have ask that question. They ask the question really early on in the process, like, what does my team involvement look like in phase one, phase two, phase three? Who else do you need? If you need IT, they're only going to be available for the next 3 to 4 weeks. What does their schedule look like? Is anyone leaving the team? Like things like that. Just like doing some general organizational governance to like managing a project like this, I think would be great to not necessarily be in a brief or anything like that, but it ideally comes up in conversation at some point.
Yeah, no, I think like that's a good point. Just it doesn't necessarily need to be in the brief to some extent, but it's part of planning. Like know
Yeah.
that this is a project that will require your involvement. It's not like tripling the work of your job. And I think that's one of the areas that we're very conscious of. And that's we know this isn't our client's only project. We know that they're running their business, they're running their department or their day to day. So that's why we have a very strict process around discovery and we let them know upfront their level of involvement. But I think going into these projects, we have had those conversations early days where they're like, how involved do we actually have to be? And even if it's minimal, it can still be a bit of a surprise. So it's something to just do a gut check of on your end and see if you are really prepared for the undertaking. Yeah. Um, the next one is actually related to something you mentioned, just about stakeholders. Like involve these different stakeholders within your organization. These decisions are not isolated. Your marketing website actually connects with IT. It connects with anyone on the content side, accessibility, leadership. There are so many owners for a website project that are oftentimes not brought in during the brief writing phase
Hmm.
or during the project at all. Sometimes they're brought in too late. One of the things we're always mentioning is the IT side. They get brought to the table late all the time. They get brought late during the proposal phase, the pitch phase, the project phase, and they're always surprised and they always have so much to add to the project that we have made it a point of asking upfront, like, who else can we involve in this discussion, specifically on the IT side? So I would say the recommendation there is just get feedback and buy-in from other decision makers or constituents within the company. So that way people are aligned because IT might have completely different goals than the marketing team. They might also have some great ideas that the marketing team could add because everyone's doing their own research.
Mm, sure.
So, I mean, that is pretty much it. I mean, do we want to do a recap?
Um, yeah, sure. Let's do a quick recap. Do a one sentence, list them all, and do like a
Oh
one
my god.
sentence summary of each.
All right. Yeah,
These are
defining.
these top 7 tips for marketers to put together an accurate brief for a website or digital transformation project. Top 7 tips. Go.
Okay. Well, start with the problems, not the solutions, right? Define the objectives and the outcomes, setting a realistic budget early, which could be a range, but put something down on paper. Get the scope as close as you can to correct. So avoid those magic words like just vague statements like events calendar. Really understand if you're open to the build versus buy side of things.
Hmm.
Understanding project phases and that there will be commitment from your team as well. So do a bit of a gut check on the amount of time your team might have for a project like this.
Hmm.
And then manage decision makers and involve them early on in the process. And that's all I've got. How many was that? Was that 5? Not 7. Yeah, yeah. I don't know.
All right.
That's
That's
what
it.
we
That's
got.
all we got today. Yeah. Sweet. All right.
Okay. Well, we'll see you later then.
Yeah. We'll do the next one next week. Okay. Bye.
Perfect. See ya.